Hello, everybody. This is part of a huge project that I've been working on. It's a research paper called Antarctica Universal. And basically, it's a plan to have a lot of things about kind of the end times of our planet. When you think about it, things keep getting warmer and warmer, although this weekend was kind of cold, so there was always some changes compared to what you think might happen in the future. But I've been basically working on this paper. It's called Antarctica Universal. If you go to this website, you can click on it, and you can open up the official paper. And the paper is right here. Maybe it's a little bit hard to see. But basically, it's on the topic of how does our planet really work. And basically, it comes down to, does Antarctica look like a human brain or a brain at all? And when you think about it, the cross-section of the human brain, which you'll see some images here of the brain, you can kind of compare the brain, human brain versus cross-section. You really have a pretty similar perspective on what's going on. So this is a pretty extensive paper. It's 271 pages, basically all about Antarctica. I've been working on it for quite a number of years. And it's basically questioning what's going on our planet, how to deal with what has happened on our planet. So if you're interested in kind of like a really futuristic planning document for what's happening on our planet, and then even off of our planet, Antarctica Universal really looks at Antarctica, but some of these other ideas, Beyond Origin, Eyes Off Earth, Yo-Yo Ma, and Yu Young Ma, and kind of the cost, and then looking at a potential Antarctica University as a project, all are pretty mysterious projects and pretty important when you think about the landmass size of Antarctica and what our future might look like on the poles. And actually, they're thinking about a lot of the new moon base station might be on the pole of the moon. So the poles often have ice on them, like on Mars. There's ice on Mars. So water is very important. And when you think about it, Antarctica is just the tip of the iceberg on what's going on. So what we're going to do is listen to Notebook LM a little bit and see what it has to say about the project Antarctica Universal, and then kind of bring in some of the topics as we discuss what's going on with Antarctica Universal.
Alright, for this explainer, we are diving headfirst down a super strange internet rabbit hole. It's a journey that kicks off with a simple yet kind of impossible sounding question, and it's going to lead us to one of the most remote places on Earth, and a truly mind-bending idea. So let's just jump right in where this whole thing starts, with this question: where is the capital of Antarctica? Now, if you know even a little bit about geography, your brain probably just short-circuited. Antarctica doesn't have a capital. It's this continent for science, right? Governed by a treaty, no countries, no permanent residents. So what on earth is this question even about? So this whole mystery seems to bubble up from these really weird online posts, kind of like this one. They're just full of these cryptic messages.
Okay, so let's jump in and try to determine where the capital of Antarctica might be. The interesting thing is that right now, a lot of the bases on Antarctica are actually on the tail of Antarctica. So there is a base at the center of Antarctica, and then there's some peripheral bases around the edges. But basically, for the historical sense, the center of Antarctica, although it's not considered the base, a lot of people consider that one of the bases, main bases of Antarctica. It's actually on the tail or on the edge of Antarctica, just because of the coldness and then the practicality of getting a boat there or in and out. So if you look at this map, you might say, well, okay, so if it's too cold on Antarctica, where can we do that? And there's actually a major plate. So if you look at this plate, this is the Antarctican plate. This whole geological plate is actually part of Antarctica. So this area here can be considered all part of the Arctic or Antarctic area. Now what I noticed was there's this very mysterious island right here. And if Antarctica is a brain, we would look at the top of this brain, And we kind of think about what's going on right here in particular and ask some very serious questions. So this whole article is basically about this island and these island area in here, and then basically what it would take to make the capital off Antarctica basically this island. And so we'll hear a little bit more of the mystery as this goes on here.
Weird drawings, all pointing to this supposed capital city that, again, we know for a fact doesn't exist. It totally feels like the beginning of an RAG, an alternate reality game, or some new conspiracy theory. Okay, so these images, they seem really confusing, but they're not just random noise. Let's try and actually piece this thing together. First up, we've got to figure out where, or even what, this so-called capital is supposed to be. And lucky for us, the source material actually drops some breadcrumbs. You get these hand-drawn maps, and yeah, they look a little chaotic, but they point to a very real place. You can see this line drawn from near Madagascar all the way out to this tiny, tiny speck in the middle of the Southern Ocean. It just gets deeper. These posts don't just call it the capital off Antarctica, they give it this other, totally bizarre.
Come on. Sit down. Yeah, sit down over here. Over here. Yeah, look. Over here. Sit down. Okay, so sorry about that. I meant to stop that recording for a moment. But what we see here on the planet is something very interesting, right? Basically, we have a South Pole, and then if we follow this all the way up, we basically have India kind of making a point down to the South Pole, and then we have up here on the North Pole. So the question was originally how we think about our lives and life on the planet. We came up with this concept in Antarctica Universal, the paper, that there is something called electromagnetic field reincarnation. So in India, they work a lot on reincarnation, and it's quite possible that someday we will be able to change our minds into some type of electromagnetic field or into the electromagnetic spectrum. So kind of thinking about the spiritual side of the universe. Now, for a long time, India has basically worked on some of those ideas about reincarnation. They haven't really worked on the astrophysics or the physics of this principle, but it turns out that this is a very important concept, because if we are trying to do a next life or go into the fabric of the universe, more than just the physical fabric, the electromagnetic spectrum, we may need to think about that carefully in the near future, and how that relates to the land masses is very important. So the shapes of these objects, obviously if this is on the pole and kind of the head of the planet, we need to think about what everything else on the planet is doing. And I've basically been spending the last many years kind of studying the planet and kind of looking at the geography of what it all means. So kind of making some interpretations about not only logical interpretations but spiritual interpretations. So this is called Yo-Yo Ma Island, and it was basically named Yo-Yo because it's kind of like a yo-yo. It comes from the tip of we have basically the tip of India, and you have this kind of like yo-yo looking, and you can see like a hand coming out here, and then like a chest of the main island, and then a head, and then an arm, and then two legs, and then kind of like a tail. Kind of almost looking like my dog, actually. But we call it Yo-Yo Ma. I had a friend named Ma as well, and it sounds like Mama, so we decided to call it Yo-Yo Ma Island, basically because it's similar to the yo-yo and similar to Mother Earth, and then basically named it like that. So that's why the mysterious name of the paper, it doesn't really say too much about it, but we're going to go back to listen to the artificial intelligence here and see what else it has to say about this research project.
Our name, Yo-Yo Ma Island. Yeah, like the cellist. So we follow that hand-drawn line on the map, and we end up here, the Kerguelen Islands. And this is a real place. It's a French territory way out in the southern Indian Ocean, and it is one of the most isolated spots on the entire planet. Seriously, it's so isolated it got a nickname that, well, it pretty much says it all. And this is where things start to click. Look at the climate comparison. The Kerguelen Islands, they're chilly, sure, about 5 degrees Celsius, 41 Fahrenheit, but the South Pole, we're talking an average of minus 50 Celsius. This is the whole key to the name, you see. It's the capital OFF Antarctica. It's close, geographically speaking, but it's a completely different world when it comes to the weather. It's cold, but it's not you'll freeze solid in seconds cold. And these islands have a really interesting backstory. They were discovered back in 1772, and just a few years later, the legendary Captain James Cook stopped by.
Okay, so this is some other stuff that started to convince me of the importance of working with Africa and how the island was actually discovered in 1772. And if you think about it, that's pretty recently. I mean, you basically have 1492 for Columbus sailing across and finding Americas. But this is 1772, many hundreds of years later, and you have some of the most famous sailors in the world, including Captain James Cook, finding this area. But the real history actually has to do with the weather. So this island is super mysterious, and it's basically a French island. So let me see if I can add the weather on here. It might take a little while to load up, but you'll notice a pattern when this weather loads up. And this is just for today, but this happens every day, is that it comes off of Africa. So basically the way this was discovered was there was a French sailor, and Africa actually is there's a lot of French-speaking people in Africa, and it's kind of the second language of Africa. So you basically have English, French, and then you have some Portuguese, but basically French and then Arabic being pretty heavily used in northern Africa. But basically French being one of the main keys to understanding Africa. And if you see, what they did is that the sailor basically followed these clouds. And if you follow these clouds, you basically end up discovering the island. And it's basically just off the island here. Sometimes it goes directly over the cloud system here. Today it's not actually going directly over there, but that's actually very near. And then we're able to discover it by essentially tracing these cloud patterns. And these cloud patterns actually often do follow very logical pathways, or you'll see them do things that are quite consistent and predictable, based on either like if you have an eruption, a volcanic eruption, you'll have cloud system form, or if you have along these fault lines, you'll also have some cloud systems go as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea for how that works. Okay, so there's so many mysterious things about our planet that we have to discover and kind of understand what's going on, right? And if we start to say that, we have to be here to basically be a part of the capital, that's not the right thinking. It actually has to do with how these weather systems work, right? So this is actually usually comes from Africa, and Africa will probably play a major role in what happens to the capital here off Antarctica someday. just like Madagascar is right here. And you can see that that's kind of a typical pattern. Let me show you another cloud system pattern so you can see how that all works.
He was not impressed. He looked at this barren, windswept place and basically named it Desolation Islands, which is a pretty stark contrast to the idea that this place could be, a new spiritual center for all of humanity. Alright, so we found the place. But that just opens up an even bigger question. Why? Why all the secrecy, the weird names, the cryptic maps? Well, this is the part where all those scattered puzzle pieces finally snap into place. And here it is, the big reveal. This capital off Antarctica, this Yo-Yo Ma Island, it's not a real capital city. It's the setting...
Okay, so we wanted to try to make some money and get this project into like a film project. So basically we wanted to support different kinds of ideas about the Earth and different religious perspectives, and basically suggest that the capital of Antarctica, we wanted to try to do a film about moving the Holy Kaaba to the capital of Antarctica. And one of the reasons is that it's just too hot for the Kaaba up here. And if you follow this line, it basically traces right up to Mecca, which is right in here. So it's actually an interesting concept as kind of making it into more of a holy island. Because as we think about our planet, we want to think about our planet more from a spiritual perspective and not just from a logical perspective. Yeah, this is Antarctica, but like, what is Antarctica actually doing? How does it change our planet? How does that change our philosophy, the way that we think, and then essentially our whole reality, our universal reality of how we might do something in the future. So we basically have a couple convergences here. We have a reincarnation path. So what happens here is that as the fields leave the planet, they're actually pulled back into the planet by land masses. So the landmass here will actually pull fields, not only gravity, but electromagnetic spectrum back to the planet, and it will pull things back down here. And essentially, the idea is that it may actually have used this as some type of mysterious focal point or an electromagnetic focal point.
Public open source film project. The entire mystery, all of it, has basically been a really clever form of viral marketing and world building.
Alright, so thanks for listening. I'm going to leave the rest of this story up to you. If you're interested, you can read the Anarchy Universal paper, or you can also read this Yo-Yo Ma Island paper and try to find out some more. I do have some details on the website. It's just antarcticauniversal.wordpress.com up here, and you can try that link. And I'll be glad to talk to you more about it in detail if you're interested in helping out. Thank you so much.